but sound all okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Fantastic. We're rolling on everything?
Yeah, rolling on everything. We are good to go.
Amazing. Leanne, thank you for joining me on Headstrong.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well.
Yeah.
Me and Jags are excited to chat with you today.
I know, I'm very pleased you brought Jags in. Okay, I need you to tell me, how old is Jags?
She is coming up to 2.
2?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Can you remember the first day she came home?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we went
Literally.
to get her and there were about eight puppies, and it was like, as I was walking towards the little pen that they were in, she was like walking towards me, and it was a beautiful moment. And they were like, be careful on the way home. She like might have like withdrawal symptoms from the other puppies. She was like tail wagging, happy. Yeah, it's been
New mum, done. Doesn't
yeah,
matter.
I
That's so
want to
nice.
get more.
Did you know that you wanted a black Cocker Spaniel? Like, you know, because
No.
it's very difficult, you know.
So basically, I knew that Ben and I would always have a dog at some point. But when, I'm sure we can get into this, but when I was diagnosed with breast cancer and I knew that I was about to go into treatment, I was like, now's the time. Like, I just thought that she would bring us joy in a really tough part of life. And it just so happened that one of our friends had a Cocker Spaniel, and it had the most beautiful temperament and really gorgeous dog. And she said that the breeder that she'd got her dog from had just had a litter of puppies. So off we went, and yeah, right dog, right time.
Meant to be, exactly. Well, we'll get into everything, but I want to kind of start by saying the last 3 years you've had a hell of a ride, should we say? I mean, obviously we've got the gorgeous Jags with us, but if you were to talk to yourself 3 years ago, what would you be saying to yourself?
I would be saying, buckle up, because it is about to get incredibly bumpy.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start, first of all, though, with the most important news. You're married. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, my word.
Thank you.
The photos look incredible.
You know, we've got so much content that we're trying to I'm trying to drip feed it out, because it's one of those things where it's like, when it's your wedding day, you just, you know, you've got so many pictures and so many moments that you want to share, but it was our perfect day.
Did it live up to everything you wanted?
Yeah, so we did it twice.
Okay.
I actually wasn't sure after kind of losing my best friend, and she died on what would have been her wedding day. So there was a lot of trauma, still is a lot of trauma around that. So I wasn't sure whether I would even want to get married. But as time has kind of gone on, I actually thought it would be a really beautiful thing to do, to celebrate love. And I feel like Ben and I have been through so much that it felt like a really lovely thing to do together. And so we had a really small, intimate, legal day. And then a couple of weeks after, we did a big party, which initially was supposed to be a big party. Then it turned into a wedding number 2. And, you know, as these things do, it got bigger and bigger. And it was everything we wanted it to be. And I wore a head to toe sparkly gown.
Amazing.
As my wedding dress on the second wedding. So yeah, it was pretty special.
I think, you know, weddings typically, as you know as well, and before you probably even thought about it, and maybe when you were growing up as well, weddings are meant to be your day of your life, you know, it's like the ultimate celebration. But as you were saying there was a conflict of emotions, maybe. Like, you know, there was a lot of joy and a lot of happiness and celebration, but also a lot of reflection.
A lot of reflection. And to be honest, I think if I'd got married 10 years, I'm 36 now. If I'd got married when I was 26, the wedding would just be a completely different event. I think it would be, my perspective and my priorities would have been in a very different place. Whereas for Ben and I, we've been spending the last few years already feeling like we've been living out our vows. So this really felt like a celebration of the love and the things that you promise and vow to one another. It's like we're already doing that. So for us, it was a super reflective couple of days with the right people there that have been on the journey with us. And it was, the 2 days were kind of bittersweet days that I think we just really felt so grateful to have.
Yeah, I know. It must have been. I mean, again, it's one of those things. You must have been so difficult as well for you with so much still raw trauma.
Yeah, it was. That's the reason we did 2. We did the legal day because I've definitely got some PTSD from losing Danielle and how that all happened. And I didn't know whether I would find the morning of a wedding to be very triggering. So by doing a small legal day, I think one of my biggest pieces of advice for anyone that's getting married is you've really got to do it your own way. I think as soon as I started to remove the pressure of what I thought our wedding should look like, and actually what would make me feel most comfortable, what suits us at this stage in our lives the best, that's when I started to really relax into it. So by doing a small, intimate legal day that took the pressure off of it being like a big show, and just having the people there that if I did find it overwhelming in not the best ways because of the trauma and, you know, the last experience I'd had being at a wedding, it was the right people there. And then that day was so lovely that I was able to be super excited for the big wedding. So, yeah.
That's good advice. You took my question away. So
Oh,
that's
really?
good. No, it's good. I'm pleased. We're in sync. I'm pleased. Was Jags at the wedding?
She wasn't. And everyone was saying,
Yeah.
is she going to be at the wedding? But from one working Cocker Spaniel owner to another, I think it's best that she was watching from afar, that's for sure. I do not want a black working Cocker Spaniel near my dresses.
Oh,
no
so true.
way.
I hadn't even thought of that, of course. Oh my gosh, you would have been wearing multicolored.
Yeah.
That's really sweet. How important is Jags in your life now? I mean, you alluded to it there, like when you were diagnosed, which we will come on to, but it was the right time for you to get a dog. But how important are dogs in your life? And Jags, most importantly.
Our whole world is completely different now that Jags is in it. And I think sometimes that comes across as quite dramatic, but it really is true. I really do feel like she saved us at a time where we were really in the thick of early traumatic grief, and I'd just been diagnosed and we were in a lot of shock, and life felt very heavy and very dark, and she allowed us to look beyond what was going on with us and have joy, have focus, have a structure. No matter how rubbish our day was feeling or our mental health was, we still had to get up and take her for a walk and make sure she was okay. And it made us feel quite present. And I've really just been like so grateful for her. I feel like she's just come into our life at the right time. And we've done that thing where initially she was sleeping downstairs and now she's in the bed with us. And I know.
Everyone sets out with the right intentions.
Yeah, it was. My mum's like, don't let her on the sofa. Oh, the sofa is hers. Don't let her in the bed. She's in the bed. It's the best thing ever. But I just feel like she keeps us kind of out of our heads and in the moment.
I think what's so lovely about a dog is as well, like they have no responsibility, no priority, because they can't think like that, of course. But therefore it's like, as you say, I need to go out for a walk. But it gets you outside, gets fresh air, gives you time to have a break, perspective. And they also, this unconditional love.
I know. I think the love for me is such a big part of it. I think losing my best friend and having such a the way I feel about grief now is very different. I don't really feel like I am missing the love I had with Danielle. I feel like I've got myself to a place where it's still the love I had for her. It just looks different. But there is still a big hole in my life, and I feel like that unconditional love that you get from a dog or any animal that you adore. Some of my friends are the same with their cats, but they're just always so happy to see you. If you work hard to build that trust with them, it's like you feel like a good person because you're like, they love you so much. And I just find that a massive honor.
It's so beautiful. What does the word friendship mean to you?
Friendship for me is it's an incredibly important part of my life. I think you have to be a good friend to have good friends. And a lot of my life, I've been very lucky that my career as a professional dancer was working alongside my friends that became my best friends, that are still my circle of friends now. My manager has been my best friend since we were 4. My husband is my best friend and we now work together. So for me, friendship has always been such a huge part of who I am, and I work really hard to maintain the friendships that I have, especially as you go into adult life. I think losing my best friend has really made me realize how valuable it is to have the support and the love and the fun in your life in the form of good friendships.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you touched on the word grief, which is such almost a taboo word still. People don't like to talk about grief.
We don't talk about grief
No,
enough.
and certainly not enough.
Yeah.
And I think people, maybe it's a British thing, but being at one with one's emotions, because you don't know when grief will hit you. You could be getting on the tube and go,
Yeah.
And I want to talk about Danielle in a way that is respectful, but also it's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah,
I think because
I agree, yeah.
It's really difficult. I mean, how's that journey been? Because naturally, there's this raw emotion. You alluded to the PTSD and trauma, and then you can have amazing days, and then some days, depending on how you're feeling, it can be a roller coaster.
I read somewhere that like grief is like the ocean. Sometimes it's like massive waves come crashing in. Sometimes it's still and really beautiful. Sometimes it's just, the waves are little, but they're just always there. And I really resonate with that. I had lost my nan like over 10 years ago, and that was the first time I really recognized grief, but never in this way, never in a situation where it was sudden and traumatic and just feels like it's not the way it was supposed to happen. And so Danielle was 34, beautiful, healthy. It's her wedding day, and she had a cardiac arrest and passed away in the early hours of the next day. And I was with her at the time. And so my grief in the beginning was very traumatic. It was traumatic grief and a lot of shock. And it took really a long time for me to even process, what had happened. But I'm learning so much about grief. And I really do believe that grief is the price we pay for love. And so I try to really let the feels in, because it's almost like if you can get your mindset in the right place, it's a privilege to grieve, because that is the sum of how much you loved somebody and how much impact they had on your life. And I wish as a culture we were better when it comes to grief. I think it's almost like we have this window of grief. For the first, I think it's, what I really noticed is as I started to get towards the 1-year anniversary of Danielle passing, it almost felt like I was on this clock of, well, that's my grieving window. It felt like after that, you kind of have to move on. And it's not like that. I think grief is always with you. And I think there's also guilt when it comes to grief. So, for example, I was working in Cannes over Danielle's 2nd anniversary, and she was on my mind the whole time. And I find those days, the milestone days, to be incredibly tough. But I was there for a job, and I was posting pictures of me smiling, having a great time. But I was still grieving, and that is what grief looks like. It's really, I think we still have so much work to do on, I think you think grief is sitting there looking really, really sad, not knowing what to do with yourself. And I've been that version of me as well. But I would love to do more going forward with grief and loss, and how we can have a healthier relationship with it and keep the conversation going. Because chances are, I think before, maybe I wouldn't have spoken to somebody and asked them how they were feeling in their grieving journey. But now that, you know, I've got my own experience with it, that person's never far from your mind. And so asking about them it's you want to speak about them.
I think actually it's what you were talking about there with you and Can. Grief is invisible to an extent. And actually, if someone is going through that process, they probably want nothing more than for you to actually ask them.
You want to speak your...
And if it means you cry, if it means you need a hug, or if you want to let it out.
Yeah, because you want to keep that person with you. I've never wanted to leave Danielle behind. She's in everything that I do. I honour her in everything that I do. She was very much a part of our wedding. I had a few different ways that I honoured her on the day. And I think that my therapist had said to me, it's like your person is in the back seat of the car. So they're not next to you, but they're still with you as you're moving. And sometimes we think that we've got in the car and driven off and they're back there. And it's just reframing grief and how you kind of, you want it can be whatever you want it to be. And it's ever changing. And there's some weeks where I feel great. There's some weeks where I'd like to close the door and just say no to everything. And it's like an ocean. It's just always changing.
And there's no right or wrong way to do it as well.
No right or wrong.
I think that's what needs to be said.
No right or wrong. There's so many different charities and groups. And for anyone that might be struggling with their grief, it can feel really lonely. It really can. So I think if you don't have a close-knit circle of friends or family around you, there's definitely places where you can reach out and just keep speaking your loved one's name and keeping their memory alive and living. For me, I feel like living my life to the fullest is the best way I can honour Danielle. I feel like she would want that for me.
For sure.
And the fact that I feel like I got a second shot at life, I think it's, the best thing I can do to live it to the max.
Definitely. As a dancer, you've always kind of been so well connected and understand your body beyond anything else. But with grief, how did grief affect your body physically?
Well, I just feel like my body completely shut down. I was in such a state of shock and I felt exhausted, and I had this like inner tremble that I just couldn't lose. And I think that was definitely shock that wore off after a while. But for me, just under a month after Danielle died, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So that period was just, I didn't know if I was coming or going. I felt so disconnected from my body. I've never felt this is grief and shock, but it literally looked like I was moving around and I was outside of my body, just looking in, just being like, what has happened here? And I think that's quite common for people that have gone through something traumatic, it's a way, it's detachment. It's when your brain can't process what's happened, and so you detach. And I definitely detached from my body, and when I was diagnosed, my relationship with my body changed immediately, but I did not care about my body or my health or myself when Danielle first died. Those first few weeks, I was drinking a lot, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating. So I've always felt like my diagnosis was actually a bit of a gift, because it was like something clicked and I was like, I have to look after myself here in the best way I can. And that's what kind of shifted me into really, really doing that, looking after myself.
Self-care. You found a lump in your breast and you went to the doctor, and you were told nothing to worry about. First and foremost.
Yeah.
But did you just have an inkling, a feeling, or you wanted to?
The second that I felt the lump, I knew that it was breast cancer, and it was super early. It was about 5 a.m. on a boiling hot day, and I'd kind of flung the cover off me in bed, and as I did that, I'd grazed my left breast, and I just felt a lump, and I woke Ben up immediately and was like, I've got breast cancer. And he was like, calm down. And I just knew. So luckily I managed to book an appointment in that morning with a private GP, and she didn't seem fazed by it. I had said to her that my health anxiety was sky high because I'd just lost my best friend.
Absolutely.
And I was panicking that something was wrong with me. But she said it was a hormonal cyst and to keep an eye on it, come back in a month if it hasn't gone away. And in my gut, I knew that it was more than that. But I thought, let me park this to one side, get through the funeral. Ben and I were going away for a week after. I really needed that time. But the whole time we were away, I was just feeling the lump, and I was like, it's not getting bigger, but it's definitely not going away. And I'm completely anxious about it. So let me just go and have a second opinion. I thought, just to relieve the anxiety that I was feeling.
Yeah, you. Every person's reaction would be, I want the comfort of knowing.
I want the comfort of knowing that this is even if it is a hormonal cyst, I want it out of my body. So I need to know what it is that I need to do to get rid of it.
Sure.
But then I called the GP again, and they were like, we'll refer you to a breast cancer clinic. And I was like, oh, no, it's not breast cancer. And at that point, it's like I went into denial. When it was like, let's take you to a breast cancer clinic, then I was like, oh no, it's only a hormonal cyst. I don't need to, go to the clinic. But they said if it is something, that's concerning, you'll be in the right place. And as soon as I got to the breast cancer clinic, I was moved through pretty quickly. And by the end of that day, I hadn't had a diagnosis, but I was told that it was probably breast cancer.
With particularly with the speed of that, and with the speed of Danielle's passing, things like that, it's shock and PTSD. Does it warp your memory of these kind of significant events? Because often it's almost blurry, and it's almost like a black hole of a memory.
Yeah, it's strange because I go one way or the other. Some days it feels really blurry. And I genuinely am like, it feels like that happened to somebody else. And then on other days, I can run every second of every minute of these days where life just took a massive turn. And it's like I'm, living it in the moment. So the brain is a strange, it's like what it can do. I think I've unlocked parts of my brain that I, definitely wasn't needing to utilize before. And I think it protects me in some situations. I realize sometimes that when my memory is blurry, that can be my brain protecting me and just giving me a little moment to just be.
Yeah.
And sometimes I want to connect it. Sometimes I really want to connect to it. I think it's a great way of being able to process it. You can't keep running away from your feelings. And so by being able to face them, you can process them. And that's kind of what I'm, trying to do at the moment. So being able to have a clear memory so that I can process those feelings is quite key for me at the minute.
Yeah, definitely. Another word that I think is difficult for people to talk about is chemotherapy and anything around cancer, because people are unsure how to react.
Mm-hmm.
But for yourself, being in the public eye and having this role where you've known your body for so long, what were those anxieties before you kind of revealed things to the public or were vocal about it? Because you mentioned you were kind of in denial to an extent, and that was prior to the diagnosis, but you also didn't want to reveal it immediately as first, of course, because of the how kind of significant it is. But then you kind of felt it necessary to be vocal.
Yeah, so my plan was to keep everything quiet for as long as I could. So I didn't know whether I was using something I did 12 weeks of chemo, 12 sessions once a week for 12 weeks. And I used something called a cold cap, which is basically a very, very cold cap, like it goes down to -20. It's like a gel cap that has very close contact with your head, and that is to freeze the hair follicles. So hopefully the chemo doesn't go up towards your head and you maintain at least 50% of your hair. So my thought process was, if I can keep enough hair that people wouldn't be able to tell that I'm going through some kind of treatment, I'm not going to say anything. Because one, I wanted to protect my energy. I didn't want to take on other people's energies. Two, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. It really mattered to me that I stayed feeling as much like me as I could. So that meant still showing up for my job and teaching my classes. And I really needed that because, I was grieving. Life felt very different. I needed something to attach myself to that was something I recognized. And for me, that was teaching my Peloton classes. And also, that brought me joy. I really needed something that was just fun. I always knew that I would share when the time was right. And I was told when I got my treatment plan that my cancer would be curable, but I would only know if the chemo worked at the end of the chemo. So I didn't really want to open up and share my story until I knew that I was going to be okay.
For sure.
That was something that was super important to me. I managed to get through my 12 weeks of chemo. I lost half of my hair, kept half. I did lose my eyebrows and my lashes, but I managed to have my eyebrows tattooed on. I had these really amazing chemo lashes that are great for anyone that's lost their lashes. You kind of stick them onto the eyelid so it gives the impression that you've got lashes, which is you don't think these things are a big thing, but they are. They make you, especially, for women, they still make you feel feminine. And it really became apparent to me that I was spending too much energy trying to pretend that I wasn't going through something. And I felt really proud of myself for what I was going through and how I was showing up and what my body was doing. But outwardly, I was putting so much pressure on myself to look like I was a fit, healthy Peloton instructor that was just in a really good place. And then I had a member come into the studio and she took one of my classes and she said she'd been going through treatment for breast cancer and I'd really helped her. And I just thought, I want to tell you that I'm going through treatment for breast cancer as well. And so I figured out exactly what I wanted to say when I made it public, my reasons for sharing it, wanting to raise awareness and give back and just start having these conversations and about self-advocating and things like that. And so when, you know, I had the conversation with my oncologist and my consultant that the chemo had worked, I wasn't at the end of my treatment. I still had surgery and radiotherapy and ongoing maintenance treatment. But I felt like I was in a place to share my story, and it was the right time. I was ready to take on the love, the questions, the energy that came my way. And I think it's made a massive difference. So yeah, I'm proud of myself for sharing, because it's a vulnerability that
Absolutely.
I hadn't, even in my grief, I didn't feel comfortable sharing that side of me. But being able to kind of put my hands up and be like, I can't uphold to these standards of perfection that I've been putting on myself, because I can't strategically place my hair anymore. There is no hair in that area. And this is what I'm going through. It felt incredibly freeing. And I've managed to kind of hold on to that feeling ever since. So I've always chosen to kind of look at the gifts in the things that have happened, the light in the darkness.
How important during kind of these incredible, as you say, monumental kind of pivotal life events and experiences is consistency, routine, and trying to maintain some sorts of normality to kind of almost keep yourself, you know, because if you're sitting around thinking about these things, being absorbed by these, and of course you want to give them time, but if you give them all your time, then you lose who you are.
Dangerous going, exactly that. I think I had so many people, I still have so many people say to me, I don't know how you taught your classes when you were going through chemo. And I always think, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't do that. I think cancer is like a full-time job. You are, and you feel like a patient. You don't feel like you. But that your body has to go through these things in order, hopefully, to get better, or at least to do everything that, you know, the medical team can do. But by keeping things in your world, in your day-to-day that are consistent, those things will change, you know, based on your energy, based on how intense your treatment is. But for me, one of the key things to going through my cancer treatment in the way that I did was maintaining as much of me as I possibly could. And a big chunk of that was Peloton, but it was also taking Jags for a walk. It was also, you know, doing a food shop and living smaller and more intentional with my energy. You know, my energy was very limited. And so I was strategic and very careful with where I used it, but I used it in the moments that would make me feel like me. So that, you know, otherwise it's so easy to lose yourself.
What does the word community mean to you?
Community feels like a safe space. It feels like like-minded people. It feels like a home away from home. It feels like a group of people that are rooting for you. And when I think of community, I think of the Peloton community. And I've been shown, you know, the Peloton community is over 7 million strong. And I've really been shown in the last couple of years how amazing it is when you've got a good community around you. I feel like it's beautiful. I feel like the people that take my rides have now found a community within each other. And that's beautiful to see. It's like-minded people finding each other, same energy. That's people from all over the world. I think it gives people purpose, and community gives people a sense of belonging. And I think when I'm incredibly lucky that I get to see communities like in action every week when I'm doing member classes and see the beauty that community can be in people's lives. It's really, I think it enables people to feel confident that they're not alone, that they belong. And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. I've felt very supported by community.
I think as well, we touched on it briefly, but community also stands for that kind of tight-knit support networking community of everything, particularly of these pivotal moments in your life that you've gone through. But there's one person that you've kind of gone through this incredible journey with, from literally moving from New York to launch Peloton in the UK, and that was of course your husband Ben. But particularly over the past 2.5 years, 3 years, how much of a pillar of stability has Ben been for you? And what, you know, I don't, let's, you know, but I want to talk.
I still find it so funny when someone says your husband.
Yeah, I know. Also, I'm getting sparkles in my eyes. I'm blinded.
Yeah, so the first day that I didn't know Ben before we started at Peloton, we'd had very different journeys to kind of get to our kind of 2.5 month training process in New York. And we built a really gorgeous friendship. And even then, when it was just a friendship, that gave me such a lovely stability. I had had really rubbish relationships up until then. And when I met Ben, I was in a rubbish relationship. It was very unhealthy, very toxic. I was very miserable. I felt quite trapped. And even then, Ben taught me that there is a whole different way of, you know, having male friendships or male company. And that always made me feel like I could be myself. And I've found that to be quite a stable, consistent presence from Ben as a friend. And then, you know, when we became partners, and he has shown up. I wouldn't have blamed, I've said this to Ben so many times, like, I wouldn't have blamed him if at some point he was like, this is all too much. Because at times it has been really too much. And I'm 36, Ben's 31. So he's, you know, there is an age gap between us, and it's been a really heavy few years. And I've been thinking, like, this is so heavy. Like, this is just not what you signed up for. But he has been like the biggest rock. He's held down the house. He held down a full-time job. He became such a source of comfort for me, but also, you know, you are, if you're lucky enough, your truest version of you behind closed doors, right? And so I would still put on a sparkly version of myself out in public, but Ben saw, you know, a very raw, unedited version of me going through cancer treatment, and he still made me feel beautiful. He still made me feel wanted. And beyond that, he learned everything. So when I would, you know, panic that the treatment wasn't working or that I wasn't going to get better, Ben had also done the foundation of learning everything that he needed to know so that he could support me from, you know, a factual place as well. And I feel very lucky to have had the support of Ben. I feel like he's been a massive pillar of strength for me, and it feels nice to be able to be in what feels like a light, happy chapter now, and for him to be able to kind of chill out a bit and just I think we're really in a place now where we're learning to just be. Everything's been either heavy or we've had a lot of distractions, and that's not to say they're bad distractions. We ran the marathon, great distraction, but you know, that was a lot of our energy. We did home renovations, we had the weddings, and they were very busy times where we both had to be, you know, just on our shit. Whereas now we're just learning how to be again.
You're allowed to relax now.
Learning how to relax. Trying to relax. productively,
Yeah.
which is not relaxing.
Every hour counts.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I love that. What about like, and by the way, congrats on the marathon. I mean, that must have been
Thank
incredible.
you.
That must have been such an important thing to have as a goal,
Massive
particularly
goal.
through that kind of journey with treatment, post-treatment.
Yeah. So the whole marathon thing came about because before my treatment or before I was diagnosed, when I was much younger, I loved running. Sprinting, 200 meters was my thing. And then I kind of fell out of love with running. And I think it's because I didn't think I was very good at it. So then I just said, I'm not a runner. I'm not a runner. And then starting at Peloton, I felt maybe, a bit inferior to the instructors that were definitely runners. But then when I was in my treatment and my energy was at an all-time low, and I was just thinking about life and limits and things like that, I was thinking, why have I told myself that I'm not a runner? I shouldn't put these limits on myself. So then I thought, wouldn't it be amazing when I'm healthy to run the marathon? And so I did. A year after I finished my treatment, I got a spot in the London Marathon with the charity Breast Cancer Now, and Ben and I raised over 50,000 for them, and it was incredibly hard. I loved the first half. I was like, oh my God, I'm doing this. And then I was like, wow, this is a really long way. But I loved it, and I think it was just a real bucket list thing for me, because it was me saying, I'm removing these limits.
Yeah, absolutely. Something with these treatments give you enormous amount of perspective on body image and beauty, particularly as a woman. I know you've talked about this before, but I wanted to ask you kind of, I suppose in a bit more depth, because when these things happen, did you feel more kind of self-aware, self-conscious? And did you get to a point where you were like, actually, I do care about my beauty, but also it's a different way of approaching it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So since I was a little girl, I've always been on stage in front of the camera. I started dancing when I was 3. I did dancing competitions all throughout my childhood. I then went to performing arts college. And so basically what I'm saying there is the way I looked has always been important from when I was a little girl. And I really held, myself to probably quite unattainable standards. Everything had to be perfect. And when I was diagnosed, it was the first thing that I said. I was like, I'm going to lose my hair. I'm going to lose my hair. And I felt like that was stripping me from me. And I do think breast cancer in particular is so invasive of the things that make you feel feminine. So I had to go through IVF because chemo can affect your fertility. I had a lumpectomy, but some women will have a mastectomy, a double mastectomy, and that's 2 parts of your body that definitely make you feel feminine. And then the hair loss, my body was changed. I had a very strong, physically strong body that then was changing because had muscle wastage during my chemo. But on the flip side, it was incredibly freeing to just be like, well, I have to let these standards go. And that doesn't mean that I stopped caring about wanting to look good or whatever. But what I learned during my treatment is that when I felt like I looked rubbish, people didn't even really notice. So I didn't have anyone. When I look back at some of my classes, I think it's really obvious that I look unwell.
Sure.
But I think what I really realised was no one really asked me anything. And no one really places as much value on beauty, external beauty, as I was thinking they did. And what I've realised is that what you bring to the table that goes beyond skin deep is so much more important. I feel like because I was making people feel good, and this is, talking about my job, because I was leaving people feeling good after a class and making them feel sparkly and joy and confident and just however they wanted to feel, that was so much more important than how I looked. And it was a massive lesson. And I've really tried to keep that with me and I'm way less bothered about, what I look like now. And my hair's grown in, but that's been a big journey. It's always up in a pony, because when it's down, it still looks quite wild. When it first started growing back, I definitely had this thing called the chemo curl. So my hair's straight. The new hair was incredibly tight and curly. And my lashes kept falling out still. And it was definitely a journey back to trusting my body. But when you're trying to get better, and when somebody, when you sit in a room and someone says you have cancer, everything that you think matters becomes irrelevant. Whether I could fit into a certain pair of jeans or my makeup looked a certain way is so irrelevant compared to wanting to beat cancer and be well and healthy again. And that shift in mindset and shift in perspective, I think, will always be with me. And it's definitely a gift, because it's wasted energy trying to be perfect, because no one's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, thank you so much for saying all that. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I was going to talk about exercise very briefly, because as you said, Peloton has given people this luxury of being able to do it in their own homes. It's flexible. It's given people back time, because they don't waste time going to the gym. It's given them privacy and variety. There's so many of you guys as well. What 3 words would you use to describe Peloton as a community?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Connected. I would say it's, you got me here. This is a great question. It's like community, connected. And for me, my word is sparkly. I feel like the people that come and take my classes, after the class, I always notice this like sparkle in them. And to just go into that quickly, it's like people that, it's so beyond what I think working out used to be, which was just like losing weight, really pushing yourself, it really being less about joy and more about, losing weight and how your body looks. Whereas now people are coming in and they're here for the music and the memories, and it's an experience. And also, like what you said, it's like you're giving people back time. New mums that otherwise wouldn't be able to have a moment for them in the day are able to, find, even if it's like 10 minutes for themselves. And I'm going to be the rest of my days trying to think of.
I know.
It's always that thing, isn't it?
I should have said this.
I know, you're always like, oh my God, that's a good word. I'm going to ask Ben when I get home.
Oh yeah, please do.
Words.
I'll ask him the same question when he comes in.
Yeah, I
good.
would be, yeah. But I think, like, if you were to ask me one word,
Go on.
it would be connected.
Okay, there we go. We love that. On top of this exercise, then, I mean, we're going to bring it back to Jags. We'll go full circle.
She's been such a good girl.
I can't believe this. She's like, whew.
You can come again.
Yeah, absolutely. On top of kind of this kind of exercise of kind of going on the bike and stuff, taking Jags out, of course, going for a walk, getting fresh air, exercise. But during that, you listen to your podcasts. So can you give me a podcast recommendation, please?
Okay, so.
And indeed anyone else.
Oh God, I'm really into my true crime podcast.
Brilliant. Which one? At the moment.
At the moment, I listen to a Korean podcast called Rotten Mangoes.
This is brilliant.
And I don't know whether I should be sharing this because the more stories I hear, the more I'm like, these are getting quite full on here. I listen to I love to listen to music. I love to listen to podcasts. I my friend Elizabeth Day has her How to Fail, which I really love, and I like to listen to My Therapist Ghosted Me with Vogue and Joanne McNally. I always feel like I've gone out for a few glasses of wine with the girls when they've got their podcast on.
Yeah.
But I can't deny true crime is my vibe.
Okay, we love that. Though.
And when I was training for the marathon and I was going on my long runs, I had been given some advice to listen to long podcasts when you're going for your long runs, and so that you could kind of switch off from the running and just focus on the podcast.
Mm.
And so that's why I started to get into the true crime, because some of the stories were quite lengthy. And but I'd be listening to these true crime stories, and then someone would run past me and I'd be like, oh! Because I'm like petrified, because in my head I'm in the story. So
oh gosh.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, but for some reason true crime chills me out.
Yeah. My final question, Leanne, is what does the word headstrong mean to you?
Headstrong to me is, if I was to have go back to school and have the little kind of brainstorm, kind of spider gram, whatever it's called, it's like headstrong is breaking it down. It's focusing on having a strong head, a strong mind. And so all of the things that you go through in life will help you to become resilient, strong, vulnerable, caring, loving, whatever labels you want to attach to yourself. It is then up to you how you use those things, that you either grow with these things that you've gone through, or you don't use them as leverage. And if you do use them, then I think they become a bit of a superpower, and I think that makes you headstrong. It's like strength in the mind, and then that's confidence, and I think that's freedom.
That's very, very nice. Thank you so much. Thank you to Jags.
Thanks,
Jags. Hello. She's literally not interested. It's like, why am I actually here? She's passed out. But thank you so much. You are like wonderful. Such an inspiration. And yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.